They're intensely interested. I have to say, they just don't want to be put through a qualification process and your sales process. This is the argument also why if you do a webinar program, that you may only be barely scratching the surface with your webinar program, because a good webinar program should have multiple steps that take someone throughout the full buyer's journey. Those group demos that are basically a group version of what you would cover in a one-on-one are still incredibly impactful, because there's a lot of people who want to learn more that aren't ready to go through your sales process. And in some cases, they want to learn more so much that they're highly motivated to respond to your "who else should attend" email and bring their boss or their coworkers along with them. Getting in front of decision makers and finding customers is one of the biggest challenges that data center sales and marketing professionals face throughout the ecosystem. We recently hosted a webinar called Data Center Go-to-Market 101, and immediately following that webinar, we held a bonus Q&A session. During this bonus Q&A session, I talked about how to get in front of decision makers, how to share video content more effectively, how to find data center customers, and how to improve pipeline generation. Let's listen into that Q&A session now. Hope you find good value. Okay, so first question up is, how do we get in front of decision makers in time for those decision makers to consider our products and services? Okay, so the first advice I want to offer is, when it comes to getting in front of decision makers, it's very rare that there's one person as a decision maker anymore. For the most part, the decision maker has been obsoleted and replaced by a decision-making committee. Why is this the case? Even when you get a magic meeting with a CTO or CEO or head of facilities or investor, whoever it is that you're trying to get in front of, because people have gotten so ridiculously risk averse that even if you manage to get the warm introduction to the perfect person that's ultimately going to need to sign off and greenlight this initiative, they're almost always going to send you back to their team to get consensus first, because the last thing in the world a leader wants to do is move ahead with a major initiative that their team is not bought into. So this is where it becomes more of a decision committee. The challenge from your perspective is, you can go into LinkedIn Sales Navigator and there's an option, of course, for decision makers, but they don't have 100% clarity on this also. However, you can. And the way you get clarity on this is by using helpful educational content, helpful educational events that's so ridiculously valuable to the person that you manage to intercept that they're highly motivated to want to share your educational resources and educational events with other members of their team. How does this work in practice? Well, most of you that signed up for today's webinar likely got back a confirmation from Zoom confirming and giving you the Zoom link to join this. You likely also got back an email from me, and it said something like, first name, Joshua, who else should attend? We know when it comes to data center go-to-market, it truly is a team sport. It takes a village. There's typically stakeholders involved across marketing, sales, customer success, product, and channel partnerships. So with that in mind, who else would benefit from attending this event? Who else would benefit from watching this recording? Who else would benefit from reading this, watching this, downloading this? Hit the forward button, add a thought or two on why this matters, and help to get your team on the right path to improving their go-to-market playbook. And the reason that this works is because you're intercepting people early enough that you've taken a tremendous amount of risk out of the process, because they're just endorsing your recommended resource. They're not endorsing. There's a really good chance they don't even really know what your company does yet. They just found this tremendously valuable webinar, on-demand webinar, video, podcast, research report, planning guide, template, whatever it is. And they're motivated to want to share this with their coworkers, with their other team members, with their boss, with people across other teams in their company. And you'll know this is working because you look down at your lead conversion confirmation emails, you look in your CRM or wherever you're capturing this information, you're like, wow, cool. Like 5, 6 people from the same account, happens to be one of our target accounts, just registered for this event. That's awesome. Can't wait to see how many of them actually attend, because we know that teams that learn together grow together. This is a huge part of you learning who has a role on the decision committee, learning about who within this company is interested in this topic. And the more you do this on an iterative basis and deliver a tremendous amount of value, the more, even more people come the next time around, because of the 5 people that registered and the 3 people that attended, 3 got fantastic value out of it, and they're highly motivated to go back to the other 2 and say, "Oh, you missed a really, really great webinar. You got to come next time." So companies that invest in this kind of initiative, whether it's lunch and learns, breakfast seminars, webinars, or all of the above, see a lot of value in reaching the full decision committee about this. So if you want to get in front of the decision makers and the decision committee early enough in a way that you're able to dramatically influence how they research and compare and evaluate pricing, where there's time to not only guarantee that you stay on the short list throughout the full buyer's journey, but create an environment where they're spending so much time with you that you're starving the oxygen supply away from their competitive alternatives. What you'll find in some cases, it could be many cases, depending on your category, is they get to the decision stage of the buyer's journey and there's no shortlist anymore. The shortlist is collapsed down to you being the only company on the shortlist. The only question is how transparent they are with you about whether that's real or whether they're playing smoke and mirrors games to bluff and negotiate. But understand when you get multiple people from the same company that are spending multiple touch points with you like that, especially in a live virtual or live in-person kind of event, it is magic. It is game changing for the kind of impact you can have on how they view this kind of strategic initiative. And in addition to seeing multiple registrants, multiple attendees from the same company, you'll know it's working exceptionally well when you get to that initial decision stage meeting and they're literally quoting your methodology. And you've discovered that your free learning resources, your educational resources, have been used by that team to guide them throughout the full process. That's how I would approach getting in front of the decision maker in time to consider your company's products and services. Okay, let me take a live question that we have here. Let's see this one. What is the best way to share video content, ensure you're reaching your target audience? Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, what's the best way to share video content to ensure you're reaching your target audience? The challenge is when you share video content organically, using like posting it on YouTube, posting it on LinkedIn, or some other place like that, you're at the mercy of an organic algorithm that decides who they want to show this to. So, in other words, when you post on YouTube, the initial audience that they're getting that video content and from really starts with your subscribers. And then, depending on how engaged each person is with your video content, YouTube uses that as a signal to start to show it to other people that are similar to your people that have explicitly subscribed to your YouTube channel. And it's largely the same thing on LinkedIn. It works a little better on your individual profile than on company pages, but it's largely a matter of the people in closest geographic proximity that are connected to you or following your page are the ones that are likely to see it first. And they largely get a pretty big say. They get a vote as to whether this is organically shared to other people. One of the tricks, best practices, whatever you want to call it, that people now use with LinkedIn video content is they @mention other people that are in the video. They @mention their coworkers, they @mention their friends, and they help to hit the like button, they help to comment, and those are all votes and signals that help to amplify it. But recognize that when it comes to sharing video content to your target audience organically, your reach is only going to be as good to getting to your target audience as your existing reach is. The quality and quantity of your first degree connections, the quality of your subscribers. If you want to make sure that it gets perfectly in front of the right target audience, then there's a number of options. For example, on LinkedIn, you can run this as sponsored content. You can run this essentially where the video can go to specific people based on belonging to certain LinkedIn groups, having certain skills endorsements, working at certain companies. What works really well, like for a target audience, is if you have a target account list. Let's say you have 400 target accounts that you're trying to reach, and pretty much anyone in an information technology job role in those 400 target accounts, you'd like to be able to see that video. That's pretty straightforward to do in LinkedIn Campaign Manager, whether you're using an integration with your CRM like HubSpot or uploading a static CSV file. You basically feed it a list of those 400 companies. You say once it's done the match on those 400 companies, I think it usually takes like 24 or 48 hours. I don't know why it's real time, but it's still not. So be patient that it takes a little bit of lead time to set that up. And once you do that, you say, okay, I want everyone to see this sponsored post that has video content in it that's in an information technology job role. Or if it's big enough company, you may want to say it not only information technology job role, but seniorities that line up with who you think would be more likely to have a decision-making role. Like LinkedIn has a CXO, a VP, an owner, a partner, or a director. Kind of, you can play games with testing those kinds of things as well. And you can do similar kinds of things with YouTube. YouTube doesn't really allow you to target quite like that, but there's other ways that you can target certainly based on geographic, you can based on certain kinds of interests. So that's on the advertising side with video. I also, as most of you are likely aware of, if you subscribe to our email newsletter, if you registered for our webinars, I host an interview-based podcast where every Tuesday I release a fantastic interview with someone else from the data center industry. And whenever we post a new video, on that day, we send out an email announcement to the rest of our list. How do we know that's super targeted to our target audience? Because we've built up that target. That's our in-house email list. We know exactly who those buyer personas are, and people get a tremendous amount of value. So that's your house email list. Some people can also do outbound, sending cold emails, sending cold messages to make people aware of that. You could use something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but just understand the free reach is you're at the mercy of the algorithm. So you may get a lot of people that are consuming that content that you didn't intend to be in your core audience, especially if your company only works in a specific geographic area or with certain industries or with certain company sizes. So the more granular your ideal client profile is, the more granular your account-based marketing approach is, the less valuable that free organic reach is going to have, and the more valuable it's going to be to use like highly segmented email marketing, highly segmented outbound, highly segmented ads. So that's how I would approach the best way to share video content, ensuring that you're reaching your target audience. Okay, let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, next question up is biggest challenge is finding customers. So that's a really broad question. How do we find more data center related customers? What it largely comes down to is as long as your company is well established and you've well past the stage where you have product market fit. In other words, you know exactly who your ideal clients are. You know exactly the products and services they purchase from you. You know the prices that they pay. You know the terms. You know the duration. You know all of their unit economics. And that's typically manifested because you look at your website, you look at the case study section, you look at the logos, and you see a lot of commonalities among who your ideal clients are. In fact, a test that I often use with clients is if I can figure out their ideal client profile by looking at their website before I ever talk to them the first time. If I know that, then not only is the website really client-centric and well-designed, but I know they likely have product market fit. Go-to-market fit is the next level beyond that, where you've successfully taken strong knowledge of your ideal clients and your unit economics, and you've successfully scaled a sales team way beyond just the founders and the company leaders being able to sell. You've scaled anywhere from a few handfuls to a few dozen to maybe even hundreds or thousands of people on your sales team. You have a very, very, very well iterated, well-oiled sales organization, sales empire that's probably at the minimum specialized by stage in the journey, where early is the sales development reps, business development reps, middle to close as your account executives, and then account managers, customer success managers after that. So you're specializing by life cycle stage. And you're also, depending on your company size, you may be specializing by either target company size, whether they're small business, mid-market, or enterprise, as well as verticals. We see increasingly in large enterprise deals where people are specializing sales teams and even marketing resources specific into a vertical. So they're just selling into healthcare. They're just selling into financial services. They're just selling into state, local, educational. They're highly, highly specialized. And what that allows you to do is your client-facing team members become domain experts, where they're able to provide true value as a consultant to the prospects and clients, and they get way beyond being perceived as someone that's just chasing the next deal and the next transaction, and they're able to truly show up as the subject matter expert, the consultant, the subject matter expert, the trusted advisor, maybe even the thought leader. And as we get to a world where that 83% point continues to move and move and move to the point where a lot of your prospects and clients want a 100% self-propelled journey, the only way you're going to earn your way back in is for your client-facing team members to be seen as the experts. Across a lot of the executives and sales leaders at data center operators, and even among some of the data center technology companies, I'm increasingly seeing a world where data center sales professionals that are thriving have become so technical with their professional development, their training, their certifications, that they can have these CTO level conversations very, very comfortably. So much to the point where if they decided that they wanted to have a nights and weekend side gig, they could hang out their shingle like this weekend and start being a fractional CTO to local small and mid-sized businesses in their area. And because they're so technical, they're able to earn their way into having these great conversations with IT executives because these IT executives see them as a peer. They don't need to be a perfect peer. They can look like a reasonably entry to intermediate level CTO. They can look more like a CTO who would work with like a 50 to 100 person manufacturing company, but at least they have some legitimate street cred and reason for IT professionals to want to spend time with them. So that's the key to finding more customers. But because at the end of the day, most of these client facing roles are moving into a world where most of the biggest value is education and trust building. And in order for you to provide that educational value, you need to be able to share unique practices, professional development tips about how other people in similar job functions in this region at roughly the same company size and similar kinds of industries have navigated this kind of research and decision-making process. And it's really, really hard to do this as a complete beginner. Now, what do you do with your sales development reps? What do you do with your entry-level talent? There's a role for those folks as well. Once they're onboarded, they're a couple months into the job. And in many cases, as long as they have strong familiarity of being able to identify the personas and understand some of these issues, some of them can be great tour guides, great concierges, great interview moderators, great podcast hosts. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be the be all end all expert. You just have to be able to provide enough value that you can introduce people to other resources in your company and have a warm handoff. But the days of people wanting to go through a selfish multi-step qualification process, this is the whole reason the self-driven buyer's journey exists. I often tell people when we're talking about analogies, think about you took a booth, you have a booth or a stand at a major conference, and you decide every 20 minutes you're going to do a demo of your product or service, and you have someone from your product team or product marketer or someone from your sales team doing these demos every 20 minutes. And the people that are intensely interested gather in very close proximity to the screen, really, really deeply entrenched in the booth to learn more. And they're fully okay with that person from your team building rapport with them and them being fully identified and you scanning their badge and everything like that. But then there's also the people that are hanging out at the extreme edge of the carpeting of your booth. They're barely in your booth. They're probably just outside the perimeter of your booth. They're listening as well. The reason that they're standing 10, 20, 50 feet back is they don't want to be identified. They don't want to be badge scanned. They don't want to be put in your sales process, but they're still really, really interested. And they're interested because they look down at their phone and they Slack their boss who's 10 booths away and say, dude, you got to check this out. Come over to booth 37, right now. This is exactly what we're looking for. They're intensely interested in what you have to say. They just don't want to be put through a qualification process and your sales process. This is the argument also why if you do a webinar program, that you may only be barely scratching the surface with your webinar program, because a good webinar program should have multiple steps that take someone throughout the full buyer's journey. Those group demos that are basically a group version of what you would cover in a one-on-one are still incredibly impactful because there's a lot of people who want to learn more that aren't ready to go through your sales process. And in some cases, they want to learn more so much that they're highly motivated to respond to your who else should attend email and bring their boss or their coworkers along with them. So that's how we would approach finding customers. How are you doing on time? So you have time for maybe 2 more questions. Totally agree, Joshua. You've shared great information here. Thank you for the invite. You're very welcome. This was another great tip or takeaway that somebody shared. You need a meeting with the whole group, either one-on-one or a lunch and learn kind of style type of simulation. The more champions you have, the better. Totally, completely agree. And the great part with educational resources, digital resources, virtual events, even in-person events, is the marginal cost of inviting someone else is pretty nominal. I talk to people a lot of times about If you're struggling to get budget or buy-in for this, and last year you invested in, say, 10 major conferences, figure out which are the bottom 20% that don't align well with your ideal client profile, that don't align well with your ideal buyer persona, where it's a real needle in a haystack, and guaranteed that simple exercise of matching up your ideal client profile against their media kit will help you identify a massive amount of budget that you can immediately put into this initiative, this company culture initiative, where you decide that you want to be seen as the be all end all experts in anything and everything having to do with your category going forward. So you have way more leverage in the beginning, middle, and end stages of the sales process. What a lot of people also don't think about is a lot of retention problems, a lot of onboarding problems, a lot of account management and customer success problems start very, very early on in the journey. So the better job you can do of educating those stakeholders on the team on your blueprint, on your methodology, on how you see the industry, on how you see this category, not only does it make for a much smoother, much more efficient sales process, it makes for better clients long term who onboard smoothly, who get to initial value, intended value, and extended value very efficiently, that are very open to cross-selling and upselling kind of conversations, that love your customer marketing, customer enablement, customer activation campaigns, and become your best promoters singing your praises from the rooftops, and love to be on your podcast and in your webinars and in your case studies, and essentially become an extension of your unofficial sales force. So this all starts at the very, very beginning of the buyer's journey, and the better job you can do at intercepting them as early as possible and as often as possible, the better your company is going to do with growing in the self-driven buyer's journey. Okay, looks like we have time for one more question. Okay, so the final question is, what can we do to improve pipeline generation, data center related pipeline generation? That's a fantastic question because it gets at the heart that visitors and leads are not enough. And one of the biggest disconnects, one of the biggest cultural problems that I see across go-to-market teams, especially in the handoff from marketing to sales, is there isn't a precise enough definition of what a lead is, because marketers talk about marketing qualified leads, MQLs, and sales qualified leads. The reality is most account executives look at a lead as somebody who fits the ideal client profile or is from a target account and is ready for a sales related conversation with them and is queued up to want to spend time with a member of your sales team. So it's very, very important that you get clear on the terminology across your team. If you're CRM, hopefully you're all using one system of record, because that alone creates a lot of transformation and alignment challenges across teams, is when you're in two different systems. But the better job you can do with getting everyone using the same CRM, the same marketing technology stack, the same technology, the same sales technology, marketing technology stack, service technology stack, a lot of these problems tend to melt away because you all get aligned on life cycle stage, who's responsible for life cycle stage, and you can have better conversations about all of that. But in terms of pipeline creation, the goal really is for your client-facing team members to be able to spend as much time as possible with your ideal prospects and clients in a learning development, professional development kind of context. So in other words, if you're the academy, if you're the instructors, if you're the college, if you're the university, for anything and everything that's related to what your prioritized buyer personas need to know to do their jobs better, individually, as a team, and as a company, they'll keep coming back. And the more time they spend with you, the more they're aligning their way of looking at your category the way you look at your category. And not only is this transformation, but it solves a lot of alignment problems. It makes it much easier for you to spread your message across the full decision committee. It helps leads progress into sales opportunities. It helps sales opportunities to efficiently progress through all your various deal stages. And this is what creates pipeline. This is what gets pipeline to close. And more importantly, this gets the right people to close that are super excited about working with your company, that onboard really efficiently, that are a delight to work with in account management or customer success. They want to sing your praises to the rest of their internal team members. They help you expand to other parts of their company, other regions, other subsidiaries. They're open to introducing you to their peers. They love to participate when you invite them on your podcasts and on your panel webinars. They love to be in case studies. And again, all of this starts with getting in early, getting in often, and being seen as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, and the most seasoned members of your team being seen more as thought leaders.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.